Welcome to today's webinar on Oracle Business Suite and the Java Security, what you need to know. My name is Phil Ryman. I'm the Director of Business Development at Integrigy and will be the moderator for this e-learning session. Speaker today is Stephen Coast. Steve is the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Integrigy Corporation. He's been working with Oracle products since 1994, and for the last 17 years, Steve has focused on the security and auditing aspects of the Oracle Business Suite and the Oracle Database, and has written and presented on these topics at various national and regional conferences. So I'll now pass it over to Steve.
Thanks so much, Phil. So today's topic is related to Java security and the Oracle Business Suite. And this presentation is based off a large number of questions we get each month based off of how do I patch Java? What is Java? Our security team ran a scan on our Oracle Business Suite servers, and they found that there's multiple versions of Java that are out of date. There's lots of Java security vulnerabilities. How does that impact Oracle Business Suite? And what we're going to do is do a systematic deep dive into how is Java used on the Oracle Business Suite, where is it actually installed, and what are some of the security ramifications around that, and then how should you be protecting yourself? What should you be doing to actually update the Java security, fix security vulnerabilities, those types of things. There's a few aspects of Oracle Business Suite security that is really a mess, and this would be the primary area that's a mess. This is not a very easy topic to talk about because there's lots of caveats, lots of different issues with version numbers, what you're doing internally with other applications. So things I say in this presentation may be slightly different in your environment just based off of which version, Oracle Business Suite version you're running, what version of Java you've got installed in different locations, what other applications you have running. So this can get very nitty-gritty very quickly in some areas. And if you say, well, that didn't work for us, that may be true because we run into that situation a lot where we have specific clients that say, well, we tried to do that and didn't quite work because we're running something else here, or we're doing an upgrade and we didn't have a specific patch installed that was required by Oracle, things like that. So there are a lot of caveats, a lot of different issues on trying to manage the Java security within your Oracle Business Suite environment. So before we get started, a very quick overview about Integrigy. Integrigy was founded in 2001 by former Big Six consultants working on large ERP implementations. Back then, people weren't changing the app's password. Fortunately, people have progressed very well. But we work very closely with a large number of clients, mostly Fortune 100, Fortune 1000 type of clients, helping them secure their Oracle Business Suite environments, their PeopleSoft environments, and their database environments. And we do that two ways. We have a set of products, the first being AppSentry, which is an Oracle eBusiness Suite specific security scanner. So it will check the security configuration and setup of your Oracle Business Suite environment by looking at the application servers, and the database. It's the only type of product on the market that does a full stack evaluation of both configuration and how you use the application. So it really validates the security. Our second product, AppDefend, is an application firewall for eBusiness Suite and PeopleSoft. So if you are not immediately applying Oracle security patches, AppDefend is that proactive layer of security that's providing virtual patching capabilities for Oracle Business Suite and PeopleSoft. So it is blocking those security vulnerabilities before they can actually hit the application. It's a very effective product, works really well, very low performance overhead, very easy to manage. Where this presentation came from mostly is from our services side of our business, where we actually do on-site security assessments and design work for a lot of different clients who have a lot of security challenges around Oracle Business Suite. So every day we're working with clients trying to solve their security challenges in terms of how do I actually secure Oracle Business Suite, but actually make it still functional, operational, and practical. How do I actually implement Oracle Audit Vault, Oracle Database Vault with Oracle Business Suite? How do I enable encryption? How do I actually install this on the DMZ to protect my application? If I'm just using iSupplier, how do I actually protect that most efficiently and effectively? So a lot of the questions that we get are based off of our security assessments and our work working with clients. And both our products and services side of our business is backed up by a world-class research team. So we actively are working with Oracle to fix security bugs in the Oracle Business Suite, the Oracle Database, Oracle Fusion middleware. So as you see those critical patch updates coming out, a lot of our work is based off of that, and we're actually reporting those security bugs to Oracle, who is then fixing it. And then also, if you go to our website, Integrigy.com, we have a large wealth of knowledge out there. We publish out most of what we do in terms of white papers. We're very proactive on putting information out there so you can have the information you need to protect your environments. So enough about Integrigy. Let's kind of jump into Java security in the Oracle Business Suite. But before I do that, I wanted to go through a little bit of terminology first. There are some terms that I'm going to be throwing out very quickly and very rapidly and talking about different aspects of Java, and I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So when we talk about the term JVM, JVM is the Java Virtual Machine. So this is the piece of code delivered by Oracle that's actually running the Java application. So the JVM may be installed on a client, it may be installed on the server, and in the Oracle Business Suite environment, it's actually installed in both, and it's installed many times. In order to get a JVM installed on my system, I actually install one of two things, either the Java Development Kit or the Java Runtime environment. If I have a server and I'm going to install Java on my server, I'm going to actually install the JDK, which is the Java Development Kit. That's a full installation of Java that includes the JVM, but a lot of other stuff to actually allow me to do development, assign code, things like that, and bundle code up to be released to people. If I'm just running this on a client environment, I would typically run the Java Runtime environment. So you have a JRE most likely installed on your desktop today. You probably have it also installed on your phone. So Java Runtime environments are widely deployed. And again, this is just a leaner version of the Java Virtual Machine without all the development tools and things like that in it. But effectively, both the JRE and the JDK can run Java applications, and they're installed in multiple locations. When we talk about Java versions, Oracle has a couple different ways to name Java versions. So we may be talking about Java 6, Java 7, Java 8, Java 9. Java 12 was released very recently. Or we may actually refer to it as a point release. So Java 1.6 is equivalent to Java 6. And we also may refer to it as the JDK or the JRE. So if I say JDK 6, that's equivalent to JDK 1.6. Or there may be full version numbers. So JRE 1.8, the latest release is 201. So think of that as a minor version upgrade. And then finally, there's different editions of Java. That really doesn't come into play with the Oracle Business Suite, but I just wanted to overview it for fullness and completeness of this presentation. So Java is released in 3 different versions: the Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition, and Mobile Edition. Everything that you'll be doing with Oracle Business Suite is related to the Standard Edition. So if you go to Oracle to download a newer version of Java for your Oracle Business Suite environment, you'll always be downloading the Standard Edition. So enough about kind of background and terminology. We're going to get right into this very quickly and kind of jump into the full topic here. The issue with Java security and the Oracle Business Suite is we're not talking about one thing. We are talking about 10 to 12 different implementations of Java that are all simultaneously running on an environment or used for administration purposes. So again, Java is not one thing within the Oracle Business Suite. Java is running the client, it's running the application server, and it's running the database servers. And on each of those tiers, I may be running 3 or 4 installations, and sometimes, like on a full database server, I may be running 7 implementations of Java if I've got other products installed also. So when we talk about Java security within the Oracle Business Suite environment, we're talking about not a single installation, but multiple installations that all have to be managed independently. And there are issues around each on when we talk about Java security, what's the issue around each one of them, and each box on this chart here has a different aspect. It's how it is vulnerable, how it needs to be patched is actually different for each of these. And some of the ones near the bottom we'll kind of gloss over very quickly. So again, most machines will have Java installed already, which is not even used by Oracle Business Suite. So when you install Oracle Business Suite, Oracle is installing independent JDKs and JREs as part of the application that is coexisting with other Java development environments that are installed on the server. So if you have one server that may have 2 or 3 applications running, you could have 10 to 20 different installs of the Java Development Kit and the JRE. So again, this is not a single install, and we'll walk through each of these and discuss what are the impact, what you need to be thinking about for each install here. And so this is why this is a complicated topic. It's not an easy topic because, again, it's not one thing that we're talking about. It's actually multiple different installations that are used differently throughout the application. So this chart here describes out for a 12.2 environment of Oracle Business Suite. Between 12.2 and 12.1, I'll focus in on those mostly here. Again, most of the topics here that we discussed will also be applicable to 11i based on the registration information. We had 2 or 3 clients who are actually running 11i also. I'm not going to talk about 11i today, but generally everything I'm going to talk about is also very applicable to 11i. It's just that it's older versions in 11i. You can't upgrade them, so you have a few more challenges there. So if I actually go into an Oracle Business Suite 12.2 server, and this is actually a EBS 12.2.7 environment, single node Vision database. So again, this is a database application server all combined, and I run a Linux command, which is the find command, and I actually look for Java binaries on this server. This is what the list comes up with. So I'm seeing 20, 30 different Java binaries actually installed on the server. Some of these are used, some of them aren't used, some of them are used actively every single minute by the application, others are just used by patching, others are never used. So this becomes some of the challenge of the Oracle Business Suite environment, that I've got actually multiple installs of Java on a single server. So if your security team comes along and they use a tool like Qualys, Nessus, those types of tools, and actually do a credentialed scan on the operating system, so they're actually on the operating system with an agent and they can actually look at the full file system, they'll actually go do a scan and find a large number of these environments. Some of these might be actually 1.4 of Java, which is a very, very old version. So they'll actually give you a report that says, hey, you've got a lot of vulnerable versions of Java on this server. You need to either delete them or upgrade them. And unfortunately, you cannot often do that. And so based on the application versions, what you're running, you may be able to upgrade them, you may be able to remove them, you may not be able to. So this becomes a challenge, and we'll walk through a lot of these. And some of these are also backups. As you'll see, a couple of them are JDK.old. So in this environment, a few of these were upgraded. Then also on an Oracle Business Suite 12.2 environment, again, you've got 2 file system homes that are being swapped back and forth for patching purposes. So FS1 and FS2. Again, I'm just duplicating all this code over and over and over based on just the 12.2 patching methodology. If we jump out to 12.1, 12.0 of Oracle Business Suite, again, very similar number of Java homes out there that are running. So again, in the application server, a little bit different because on 12.2, I'm running WebLogic, but on 12.1, I'm actually running a 10.1.3 Fusion middleware and also 10.1.2. So both those require Java. So I've got 2 installs of Java there. So this is kind of the challenge, that thinking through this isn't a single thing. And then on the client issue, again, the client, I can use Java plugin or I can use the newer Java Web Start. And we'll walk through each of these. Before we do that, we'll kind of jump back and talk about Java security at a very high level first, and we'll start by looking through, how do I patch Java? What are some of the security vulnerabilities and risks, and what are version issues that I need to be thinking about? So at a very high level, Java security is handled as part of the Oracle Critical Patch Update process. So most clients are very used to patching Oracle databases, patching the Oracle application server, patching the application. What they tend to forget, and during most of our security assessments that we see, is the Java is not being patched. Because if I kind of just look through a lot of the notes, actually other people out there advocating Oracle Business Suite security, oftentimes they miss the Java piece. They talk about, oh, patch this, patch that, but they actually don't talk about patching the Java. Where patching Java is important also, especially on the client side. And so these patches are released by Oracle on the quarterly basis, so January, April, July, and October, same cycle, included as part of the Critical Patch Update release. The huge difference between the Java security patches and the rest of Oracle Business Suite patching for the database application server is that the Java updates are actually version upgrades. So I don't get a patch. I actually will upgrade my Java versions on this server from, let's say, 191 to 192 in this case. So if we look at the versions released as part of the January 2019 CPU, Oracle released 3 updates. And so 3 updated versions. So 11.01, which is not supported by Oracle at all. And they updated, and they did 1.8, 192, and 1.7, 201. And so those 2 versions are really applicable to the Oracle Business Suite environment. And what's also interesting is, we'll talk about in a second in a little bit more detail, is Java 1.7 is under commercial license now. So if I don't have a support contract with Oracle, I'm unable to download Java 1.7 from the Oracle website. I actually have to go into MetaLink, and I have to actually have a license to do that. And I've referenced my Oracle support note there, which has more information about how this licensing works with the older versions of Java. So very important on versions and Java support. So even 12.1 came out with Java 6 support. So I would have to actually upgrade Oracle Business Suite 12.1 on the application server from Java 6 to Java 7 to get the latest support. So Oracle is moving very quickly with Java support now, because actually in the last year, Java 11 and Java 12 have both come out. Previously, it was 3 or 4 years for each of these major versions. Oracle has changed their cadence on how they release Java updates. So Java update and major version upgrades are coming out very rapidly now. So to go from 9 to 12 was about the same time as Java 6 has been existing. So very quickly, they're coming out with new releases. Java 6 is no longer supported. It is even out of extended support from Oracle as of December 2018. Java 7 is fully supported through July 2022. That's a very key date, because as we talk about what versions of Java supported by the different tiers of Oracle Business Suite, Java 7 is going to play very prominently in that, and also Java 8. As of today, there is no support for Java 9 Plus on Oracle Business Suite. That will be coming in the future, but that may require significant upgrades, because some of these components, like the web server components, the Java Web Start components, have to be significantly upgraded to support that. So one of the questions we always get is, okay, what do I do in July 2022? I'm going to ignore that question for now and wait a couple of years. Oracle, I think, is still formulating their answer to that and their response. So do keep in mind, in 3 years, there is a hard stop here on Java support, and we're not sure what Oracle is going to do on that, because Java 7 is the only component supported for the application server piece, and we'll talk about that in great detail. So again, there is a date out there 3 years out, but Oracle has not released any plans or any updates of what they're going to do. Java 8 support goes through 2025, so that gives you kind of enough runway, at least in the short term, to look out a number of years to say, yes, it's going to be fully supported. I do want to get to Java 8, and there'll probably be support for Java 13, Java 14, and in the next couple of years for Oracle Business Suite. But the most likely that will require significant upgrades. So there is a challenge for those clients that don't want to upgrade necessarily to future versions of Oracle Business Suite, that in order to support latest versions of Java to get those security patches, you may have to do significant application upgrades as well as technology upgrades. We do not see Oracle upgrading the Oracle application server in order just to get support for Oracle Java 12 in the future. You most likely will have to do an application upgrade to Oracle Business Suite 13 or whatever is going to be in the future. So when we talk about Java versions and Oracle Business Suite support, what is the impact? What are those versions that I need to be thinking about? Where am I today? And kind of where is everything going in the future? So as of today, Java 6 is no longer supported. There's no more updates coming out as of December 2018. So you must be upgrading in order to get security patches if you're on Java 6. As you see, this chart breaks out client and server. There are significant differences between what's supported on the client. And when I talk about client support here, I'm talking about the Oracle forms that plug in the Java Web Start JInitiator that's downloaded to each desktop in order to run the Oracle Forms professional interface. That's client support. When I talk about server support, that's on the application server on the database server. And again, there's multiple ones on the server side, but generally this has kind of been boiled up to a very generic general support levels. So Java 7 is supported using the Java plugin only, and I'll talk about the Java plugin versus WebStar in a second. That's under extended support, so you've got through July 2022. The server piece is only supported under Java 7, and the latest versions are automatically certified. The one nice thing that Oracle has done is all Java updates are automatically certified for Oracle Business Suite. Primarily, I would say the way Oracle phrases is that all versions are automatically certified. Where what I think they're testing and what we believe they're testing and what kind of some basic conversations we've had is they're testing what's coming out as part of the critical patch updates. That's their testing cadence in terms of Java, it appears to be. So generally, when they say latest versions are automatically certified, think of that as the latest critical patch update versions are certified, both on the client and on the server. So again, you've got 3 years support for Java 7. Oracle is working up a plan. We'll see what they do and how they're actually going to support things in the future in terms of application server support. Java 8 is fully supported in the client, and it is not supported on the server as of today. That becomes an issue, again, in 3 years when we're talking about the support in July 2022 ends for Java 7. As of today, there is no future stated release plans or commentary from Oracle on how they're going to support Java 9 through 12. So today, you're kind of stuck on the client on Java 8, and on the servers, you're stuck on Java 7. And again, these are all, I referenced my Oracle support notes at the bottom of each page to give you a point of reference. So again, those documents are always updated by Oracle, so that's always a good thing to star and get updates on to see how the Oracle support is changing. So that's from a perspective of how I need to upgrade, what versions are supported. The key question here is, what is the fundamental issue? When I talk about Java security, what am I talking about? What am I talking about that I need to do? And this is actually an interesting discussion because Java security in the Oracle E-Business Suite, there's really not much for me to do from a security configuration perspective, from hardening down Java, locking down Java. There's really not anything to do. As I do the download the Java to my clients, there's a little bit of work there, but that's pretty straightforward. There's not anything that we check it just to check it, but we don't ever find any problems with clients. The issue here is purely a security vulnerability issue, security bugs released and patched by Oracle that are vulnerable in your environment because you've got these multiple Java installations running throughout the Oracle Business Suite stack, both on the client and on the servers. How can those be exploited? There's at least 5 to 20 every single quarter coming out with very serious security bugs in those. How am I vulnerable? Which installs of the JVM are vulnerable? Which ones aren't vulnerable? And so if we kind of take a step back and say, okay, let's look at the different vulnerabilities and the different attack vectors. How could these vulnerabilities actually be exploited in these different JVMs on these different tiers of the Oracle Business Suite stack? If we look at a very high level, we can actually break them down and categorize them into a couple different categories. Starting with the client side, this is on each desktop. So again, I'm downloading this plugin WebStart down to every single desktop that needs to access the professional forms interface. How is that vulnerable? Potentially, if someone can execute untrusted code on a JVM, they can bypass the security manager. If I can pass in certain data to an application that's running Java, I can potentially exploit security vulnerabilities within the Java APIs. One variation of that is Java Deserialization. We'll talk about that a little bit more detail. There's also cryptographic issues within Java. Java is controlling the TLS, that cryptographic connection between the client and the server on both sides. So how it's encrypted, what ciphers it's using, what protocol. So hopefully everyone on the call knows a little bit about SSL and TLS. You use it probably every day when you go to the bank. It's that padlock on your browser. So that requires very specific protocols and ciphers, and those become outdated. Those become potentially weak over time, and so you need to be upgrading those as you're upgrading the Java. And then Java on both sides, both the client and the application server, are controlling that cryptographic secure connection between the two. And then finally, local. Local would be if I have access to your application server at the operating system level, what can I do with the Java environment? So we'll quickly walk through each of these and kind of describe what the vulnerabilities are and why it's an Oracle Business Suite environment. And we'll start off with the client-side attack vector. The client side, again, this is each desktop you have, and you're installing that Java plugin or the Java web start. How is that potentially vulnerable on that side? So if I'm running an older version that has maybe not been patched for a year, I've turned off the auto update so it's actually not being updated on each client. What's the potential risk there? Well, I can't just scan out and attack each client. However, if I do a phishing attack, I somehow get that client browser to redirect to a malicious website, which would then download an applet or a JNLP file if you're using WebStart. I can then exploit security vulnerabilities on that machine. This becomes problematic, especially for clients out on the internet that then are kind of compromised and can be directed off. There's a large number of security vulnerabilities that can be exploited in the client environment, and that's why it's very important to be patching the client environment. This client-side vector has really no applicability to the application server database server. This is purely the client issue that I need to be updating that client side because, again, there's a number of security vulnerabilities that let me very quickly, if I can get that person to click on a bad link in their browser, goes to a website, which then acts like it has a Java application in it because it does, and it passes down an applet or a JNLP file, which then kicks off a Java process and actually is running Java code on the client machine, and that Java code can be exploiting security vulnerabilities. And what that code does is it breaks outside of the security manager. So Java has a very robust security manager, which blocks access to the local machine and lets you only do what the applet's allowed to do. Unfortunately, there's enough security vulnerabilities in Java that actually let me break out of that security manager, and I can actually then potentially execute things at the operating system level, access sensitive data, do things within the browser, that type of thing. So again, this is why it's important to be upgrading those clients. And the one caveat here is the client has to do, the end user has to click on a link. They have to initiate this process. This can't be something that I'm just going to be able to connect and do. Another vector here is untrusted code. And this is kind of just a variation of the previous client-side issue because, again, I'm getting the JVM to execute my own code. When I think about a Java application, I can't really get the Java application to execute Java code because it's executing its Java code, not code that I've written and tried to pass to it. So untrusted code is, there's really two places I can do that. Again, on the client, same thing is I'm just getting the client to connect somewhere. They download an applet that has my own Java code that I try to exploit these security vulnerabilities. That I can do networking, I can execute things at the operating system. Another area that people tend to forget about is within the Oracle database server, within the database itself running is actually a Java virtual machine that's used by Oracle Business Suite. So anyone who can connect to the database, so all your ad hoc users, etc., those people are connecting, doing direct database connections with SQLnet, maybe using SQL Plus, SQL Developer, they're connecting to the database. There are security vulnerabilities within that Java virtual machine that's actually running within the Oracle database. So that's another aspect. So when you're actually patching the database level, you need to be also patching the Java virtual machine within the database because there are security exploits, and there's been a number of them. There's probably been 5 or 6 over the last 2 years that are actually Java virtual machine specific issues within the Oracle database. And from that, I can take over the entire database. I can actually, on a couple of the vulnerabilities, I can actually get to the operating system level. Because again, the Java within the database is very powerful. It's a full install practically of the Java virtual machine. And anything I can do in Java, I can actually execute that within the context of the database. And a few of the security vulnerabilities let me actually execute operating system code as the Oracle user. And so then I can kind of compromise the entire database server pretty easily. One of the most problematic areas, though, is untrusted data being passed into the Oracle Java virtual machine running on the different tiers. And from this, I can actually, if your application is written and is doing something, like processing an image file. There's been a number of security vulnerabilities within the Java image processing. So if it gets a JPEG file in, or I'm calling a SOAP or a REST service as a web service, there's security vulnerabilities within that standard Java APIs that actually let me do things in terms of accessing sensitive data, again, executing things as the OS layer. This attack vector actually goes across all the Java virtual machines. So on the client side, again, if I can get the client to execute some of my own code, I can potentially call these APIs and actually do things as another series of exploits that are available to me. On the application server, I'm actually using Oracle Business Suite. Oracle Business Suite is a Java application. It's a very large Java application. It has a lot of functionality. It has a lot of web services. It's using a lot of these standard Java APIs. And if I can find an entry point into the application that's actually using these Java APIs, and there are a large number of cases in which this is very true, I can then actually exploit those standard Java security vulnerabilities and execute things as the OS layer, potentially access other functions that I'm not allowed to. So this is applicable to the application server also. So when I'm talking about upgrading and patching the web application server as part of Oracle Business Suite, this is the issue. Within the Oracle Business Suite, there are, hopefully everyone, we've got probably a lot of DBAs on the call, there are 2 installs of the Fusion middleware stack within the Oracle application server. One being 10.1.3, which is providing the WebTier services. That's the web services, the self-service interface, OA framework. It's providing all those connections. But there's also a 10.1.2 install of Fusion middleware, which is providing the forms interface and the reports interface. So when you do Oracle reports or you do Oracle forms, those are actually executing as 10.1.2. When I say limited here in terms of vulnerability, it's very, very hard. And we've only found one case where we believe we can actually exploit a Java security vulnerability through the forms or through the reports. And it was actually a reports issue. So it's very limited to the application web tier versus the 10.1.2 interface. So based on our recommendations later, we'll talk about, well, you probably need to upgrade the 10.1.2 occasionally, but it's not as important as the web tier piece. And then finally, also the database JVM. A number of recent security vulnerabilities were all based off of an exploit code published out. Security vulnerabilities very well published and documented on how to exploit these Java APIs within the Java database JVM. As you can see, there was a lot of other boxes on the chart in terms of JVMs installed on the machine. A lot of those are used for administrative functions. So a lot of those don't necessarily need to be upgraded all the time because, again, if I am locally on the machine, I'm an administrator, yes, I can exploit some of these vulnerabilities. But to remotely, as part of the application, as part of just connecting via the network, a lot of those JVMs aren't used. They aren't actively used by the application. An attacker outside the box really can't get to them. So again, it's very pinpointed where the Java security risk is within the Oracle Business Suite environment, but it is a substantial risk. It's something not to be overlooked in terms of how easy it is to exploit a lot of it. Java deserialization is a very specific type of attack against a Java application. And fundamentally, behind the scenes, Java has a capability to serialize objects. And what this is a way for you to actually take a code object. Let's say I've created an object within the Java application that's a vendor. And I want to pass that across a network. And what you do is you serialize it so it can be actually passed around the application, or it can actually be passed across the network. It can be passed through web services, etc. There's lots of things you can do. There's a very specific flaw within the way Oracle Java serializes objects in that it then can call helper functions. And so if I have a vulnerable application that accepts serialized applications and they haven't protected that serialization very well, you can then pass in a serialized object. And there's actually about a dozen different vulnerabilities in Oracle Business Suite that actually allow you to do this. And there's kind of 2 steps to it. So I do need a vulnerable application. And again, Oracle Business Suite is a vulnerable application. There's at least a dozen deserialization attack vectors within Oracle Business Suite. Most of them have been patched and corrected. There's a couple that are still open, and Oracle will be releasing patches in the near future. But I also need a second piece to it. I need this helper function. And the Java security patches actually are fixing these helper functions. I need something to actually exploit, something to actually execute my code. So it's a two-step process. One is accept a serialized object to deserialize it, and then that serialized object calls out to something, and that's the exploit, is it then calls out to something. But it needs that something to call out to actually do something, like execute something at the OS level, access network functions, and things like that. And so there's all these helper functions, and a very famous one is Apache struts. So a lot of times when you're actually patching the Java components or application components, you're actually patching these third-party libraries. But there are a few vulnerable functions within the core of Java that act as helper functions. So again, now this is the same thing as across both the WebTier, the database JVM, and the client. That's where I can do it. And so on the WebTier, all I have to do is have a vulnerable URL on Oracle Business Suite, pass in a serialized object, and then I can actually execute things on the OS level. If I patch the application or I patch Java, I can potentially protect against that vulnerability, because again, I need two pieces. I need an A and I need a B, and if I patch A as part of the application or I patch B as part of the Java update, I can actually fix this problem one of two ways. But again, I need to apply one of those patches, otherwise the application is vulnerable. And there's been about at least a dozen of these vulnerabilities in Oracle Business Suite. So if I take those attack vectors that we just talked about and look at the January 2019 CPU, there was 4 vulnerabilities that would be vulnerable within an Oracle Business Suite environment, either on the application server or on the client, or both. And 2 out of these 4 were on the application server, and all 4 on the client. So if you're running WebStart and I can pass in a phishing URL and get one of your end users to click on that, you can compromise the entire machine. I can break out of the Java sandbox and execute code on the desktop machine and actually compromise the entire machine. 2 of these I can actually go through also through the application, if there is, one's a deserialization and one's just within the REST libraries that I can actually do something on the application server. So again, this is an example. So here's 4 vulnerabilities here. So if you haven't applied the January 2019 Java security updates to both the client and the application server, I can potentially cause some issues. A couple other attack vectors here that aren't as important to the Oracle Business Suite environment. If you talk to your security team and you tell them I'm not running TLS 1.2, they're going to be like, oh no, you have to be running TLS 1.2 because someone's going to definitely just break into your application, take all your data. That's much harder to do than anyone's probably willing to spend time on the Oracle Business Suite, especially if you're just running iSupply or something, because the data traveling back and forth isn't that sensitive. Again, if you're a bank, you're eBay, you're Amazon, you're Google, you're very, very worried about this. We rate this usually as a low, sometimes a medium type of vulnerability on an Oracle Business Suite environment if you're not running TLS 1.2. But the key point here is when we actually want to upgrade to the latest encryption protocol, being TLS 1.2, or the strongest ciphers, so that'd be like AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. If I want to upgrade to those latest ones, that's all controlled by Java, both on the client and the application server. So in order to get the latest cryptographic protocols and ciphers installed, I actually have to upgrade the client and the application server. So again, when I'm upgrading these Java virtual machines on these different tiers, I'm getting these updates to these cryptographic ciphers. But again, I probably wouldn't lose sleep over this. I'd lose sleep over the previous issues. This one, yeah, it's nice to have. I'm going to make my security team happy. But in terms of actually losing data and having my system entirely compromised, it's a very, very low risk. The final one is local. So first caveat here is if you're letting random people, developers onto your production application servers and database servers with operating system access, you already have a problem. This is how they'll actually take over the entire machine and do things. So again, you should never be letting anyone except for the DBAs onto the application servers or database servers, especially in the production environment. In a test environment, development environment, yes, that makes sense. but in your production environment, no one should ever have operating system access except for your DBAs and your operating system administrators. So there are a number of issues because, again, there's all these JVMs installed on the machine, and a lot of them are vulnerable versions. So there's potentially things I can do, potentially things I can actually execute as people who aren't supposed to be. I can actually tamper some of the files potentially based on file permissions, those types of things. But again, local issues hopefully should not be because I'm blocking access to the operating system by anyone except for the DBAs, and they already have access to everything. So this typically isn't an issue. So now if we take our chart there and actually have broken it out, and we'll go through each of these different JVM installs and kind of talk about what you should be doing for each one, because there is no overwhelming strategy or recommendation here. It's really pinpointed going through, okay, I've got a client, I've got an application server, I've got a database. What am I going to do about these different JVMs? Some of them I can't do anything. Some of them actually have, there's very strong recommendations what you should do. So starting with the client side, this is that Java piece of code that's actually downloaded down to each client desktop in order to run the Java Professional Forms interface. This used to be called JInitiator. Oracle went from JInitiator to the Java plugin, and as of April 2017, they actually now support another technology called Java WebStart. Java WebStart only supports JRE 8, and so therefore you're getting the latest version. There were some improvements in the Java WebStart. So the recommendation is really to run Java WebStart versus the Java plugin. However, if you're running the Java plugin, I probably wouldn't lose any sleep over it at this point. Where you're going to lose sleep over the Java plugin is that it's actually being de-supported by Firefox, Chrome, and Microsoft Edge. So in order, those browsers will no longer support the Java plugin, so therefore you need Java WebStart. So generally, if you have an option and you can use Java WebStart, we highly recommend that because it's a little bit more robust. But again, there's very few security features I can really pinpoint and say, hey, no, you need to run it because of this feature. It's really just kind of a conglomeration of different slightly improvements, a little bit more robust, supports all the modern web browsers, those types of things. You should be updating the Java WebStart or the Java plugin every single quarter. So when Oracle's releasing a Java update, you should be updating this as part of your cadence of actually applying Oracle critical patch updates. You should always be using the most recent version. And you actually get another benefit right now because Oracle, as of 181 of the JRE 8 and Java WebStart, is supporting multiple form sessions. So this is actually a nice feature that a lot of people are using. Oracle also supports the auto update feature and capability as Java WebStart. So you can actually be updating Java WebStart automatically on all the desktops, and Oracle is supporting those versions. You do have to make sure that you're actually also, occasionally there's a patch that's required on the application server side to support those newer versions. So again, this is kind of an update. And the risk here is that if you can initiate a phishing attack and there's a vulnerability within the JRE installed on each client desktop, you can actually compromise those desktops. What's very important here is on JInitiator. JInitiator was the version before Java plugin. So if you kind of look at going back in time, it was JInitiator, Java plugin, Java WebStart. One of the things that we actually test as part of our security assessments is actually if people have JInitiator installed still on desktops or it's still being used. JInitiator was horribly, horribly buggy with lots of security vulnerabilities. And when you actually installed it, it would install multiple versions. We did a recent client security assessment, and we just kind of have a little URL we actually point people to, and it tells them what JInitiator versions that were installed. This client has been a long-time client. They started at 10.7 terminal, went to Smart Client, and 10.7 Smart Client. They went to 11.0, 11.5, and we had them test. And when they connected, they had 23 versions of JInitiator installed at least on one desktop, the one we tested. And so anyone can, if you can get them to redirect to a website, it's very easy to attack JInitiator, run a small applet, and take over the entire desktop. So it's very important when you're actually doing this, you're removing older versions, especially of JInitiator. If you're upgrading from JRE 6 JRE7 to JRE8. We strongly recommend you're removing JRE6, JRE7 from the desktop if possible. What this recommendation here doesn't include is what's very problematic is that you have other job applications out there running. It's very difficult to try to get this all right and how you balance out multiple versions. So we actually have a lot of clients that have to run JRE6, JRE7, JRE8 on all the same desktops because all their different job applications support different versions. So this is a very easy recommendation to make. It becomes very problematic in reality because you have to balance this out on what other job applications you're running. So that's the client tier. So again, trying to get that upgraded as much as possible on a quarterly basis. And when we start talking about the application server now, I'm going to break it out into a couple different components. The most important one is the WebTier. This is the piece that's facing the client. This is out on the internet. This is if you're running iSupply or any other modules on the internet. This is what's internet facing. So anyone can connect to it. Hopefully I've secured the DMZ correctly, but now this provides another layer of vulnerability. And on 12.2, when you upgraded from 12.13 to 12.2, Oracle actually changed the application server underlying Oracle Business Suite. So on 12.2, you're running WebLogic. So there's a little bit of a difference here, but fundamentally from what you're doing, patching it, there's really no difference. The vulnerabilities here are those untrusted codes. So if I can connect to a URL and I have found an application vulnerability that then allows me to call these APIs, and Oracle may not consider an application vulnerability. They may consider it just a Java vulnerability because, well, the application functionality is to call that API and do that. So there's a number of points where the Oracle code lets you call Java APIs behind the scenes to do some processing, and it's a Java vulnerability, not an application vulnerability. And Oracle doesn't fix the application side because they don't consider it a vulnerability because if you patch the JVM, it's fully patched. So there's a number of cases like that. So again, this is vulnerable. This is what someone can attack and actually just access some URLs and do some attacks. And so therefore, as part of your critical patch updating process, you should also be updating the WebTier Java JDK. And I've included my Oracle support notes that very clearly tell you how to do this. But as you're patching the business suite, as you're patching the database, you should also be patching this one JDK very specifically, as well as the client side. On the flip side of this, again, on 12.1.3, there's both a 12.1.3 home, 10.1.3 home and a 10.1.2 home. The 10.1.2 home is for Oracle Forms and Reports. This one is very difficult to exploit, and therefore, we really only recommend that you actually upgrade this JDK based on when you're actually upgrading the Oracle Forms. So when you're doing any of the application server upgrades, you should also be upgrading the JDK just for completeness, but this one's not as important. The other problem here is when you're testing it, this potentially, most likely not unless you're doing a whole bunch of different version upgrades, most likely won't impact the Oracle Forms, but it potentially could. So that's why we kind of recommend you upgrade this at the same time you're upgrading Oracle Forms, because when you're upgrading the Oracle Forms, you'll do the same testing, and you have to do a little bit more in-depth testing whenever you do an Oracle Forms upgrade, because again, we all know potentially breaking stuff. And so therefore, also upgrade this JDK at the same time you upgrade the Oracle Forms, therefore you do one set of testing. And generally, we don't recommend upgrading this on a quarterly basis, just because therefore you have to do a lot of testing, and it's just so difficult to exploit. We found one security vulnerability over time within the Oracle reports that you could actually exploit remotely. But again, not as common. So again, this is one of those JDKs that's kind of sitting there. It's being actively used, but it's that attack vector. It's hard to get into. It's hard to actually find a security vulnerability that would let me access the JDK level APIs here, because you're kind of going through forms, you're going through reports, so it becomes much more difficult. Oracle also has a JDK installed on the database server as part of EBS. So you've got your database server at home, and there's that Appsutil directory. In order to do administrative functions and some patching, they actually install a whole version of the JDK as part of the EBS Appsutil directory. Again, there's very low risk here because there's no external access to this. There's no way for an attacker, unless they have local operating system access, to actually get into this JDK and actually execute it, actually use any piece of it. Therefore, we don't really recommend patching this one unless your security team is doing scans and they're kind of pointing it out and yelling at you for it. There's really no major reason to upgrade it. And therefore, if you are doing an upgrade to this JDK, and Oracle supports upgrading it, but we generally recommend doing this when you're doing major database upgrades. Kind of everything falls together. It's a good time to do it. It's a very quick upgrade, so there's not a lot of impact. So therefore, there's really no reason to upgrade it, but for completeness, we actually do recommend you do. The other JVM on the database is within the Oracle database. So again, there is a JVM running as part of the Oracle database that's actively used by Oracle E-Business Suite. And the vulnerability here is anybody who has a database account can connect to the database server, SQL Plus, SQL Developer, or whatever. And there are a couple problems, and this has been patched recently, at least 4 or 5 times. At least a couple of those were actually in publicly packages and things that were then calling Oracle JVM code. Therefore, it was vulnerable. So many of these vulnerabilities really require a create procedure because I have to either create Java code and I can do a create procedure. So if someone has create procedure and also the ability to create Java packages within the JVM, much more vulnerable. Most people don't do that. Most people have create session, but there have been some create session vulnerabilities within this. So as you're patching the database, you should also be patching the JVM. When you install the patch, you actually do opatch. It updates the actual Oracle home code. Then you run cat CPU SQL. That updates the database. And if there's actually a JVM update, you actually have to run another process to actually update the Oracle JVM. So that step is mandatory as part of this. So we strongly recommend you do that. And as part of like our security assessments, we're checking for that. We're checking that the JVM has been updated because we find a lot of times people aren't updating the JVM as part of the patching process. They kind of update, they do the database update, but they kind of stop and gloss over those last couple steps. So very important that you're updating the JVM because again, anybody who has a database account can go in and actually exploit some of these vulnerabilities. And again, I'm bypassing the security manager. I can call, there's Java classes within the JVM that let me do network access. They let me actually execute things as the operating system. And I can bypass the security restrictions on those packages within the JVM to actually do things at the operating system level, and that code gets executed as Oracle. So again, very important also to upgrade this JVM. On the Oracle database server is also a couple other JVMs. Within the Oracle home, there is a JDK that's used for certain administrative functions. And what's very interesting is Oracle tells you not to upgrade this JVM. They have no supported process to do that, and they provide no support for that. So in order to upgrade this JDK, you actually have to upgrade the database to the latest version. And again, 18C, if you want to get the latest one, you'd have to go to 18C, 19C. Those aren't supported for Oracle Business Suite. So therefore, you're kind of stuck on this JDK. And if your security team is doing security scans and they're finding these JDKs that are vulnerable, they're saying, oh, you need to upgrade these. And in this case, you're kind of stuck. Oracle's not letting you upgrade it, and it's there. Fortunately, it's not used. There's not an attack vector. If someone's local, they have access into the Oracle Business Suite database Oracle Home, they potentially can do something, but that's very unlikely. So therefore, very low risk because there's no really attack vector. The other one is, again, there's another JDK as part of, in this case, it's a JRE, as part of opatch. So opatch has a full version of Java installed there. And again, it's a fairly vulnerable version. And in order to upgrade this one, you have to now upgrade opatch. The opatch team is a little farther behind on their Java version. So when a new Java version comes out with a bunch of security fixes, Oracle's not putting this into opatch. They kind of wait, oh, we'll do an opatch upgrade. Somebody will pull one down. We have to go through a testing cycle. So it's usually multiple versions behind. And then finally, there's other JVMs installed on the machine. So as part of the OS, almost always there's another JDK installed as part of the OS. That may be actually an open JDK version, which is an open source version of the JDK that the Oracle JDKs are based off of. Those are not used by Oracle Business Suite at all. They may be used by other applications. So that's much more of a operating system level issue that should that be even installed, should that be upgraded, things like that. There may be other application services that are using it on the machine, but there is no reason, no interaction with Oracle eBusiness Suite on upgrading that JDK. So when we're always asked about that is, we don't care from an Oracle Business Suite perspective if you upgrade it. We recommend you strongly upgrade it, but you have to verify how it's used on the machine. You also may have Oracle Enterprise Manager agents installed. You may have Oracle Audit Vault agents installed. In order to upgrade those two products, you actually have to upgrade the underlying agents which include it. There is no real way to upgrade some of those JDKs within those agents. Typically, you have to upgrade the agent, which has a bundled version of the JDK. And again, those tend to be multiple versions behind. So that's a high level of Java security within the Oracle Business Suite. And again, this is kind of a messy topic because there are so many different versions. There's no one overlying recommendation. Generally, the recommendation is, as I laid it out, pick and choose which are the most high-risk Java installations, which ones can be actually exploited. And that tends to be both the client side, which should be upgraded at least quarterly, and the application server side, which should be upgraded quarterly. And then on the database is the third one to a lesser extent, because at least I have some access controls around that. But that should be upgraded as you upgrade the database. I will turn it back to Phil to see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for shedding some light on the Java situation. Got a couple of questions here. First one is, why are there always two versions of Java released at the same time?
Oh, very interesting question. That's very true. So actually, let me jump out here. Pause here for a second. I'll actually show you. Okay, so hopefully you can see this screen. So this is actually the Java site at Oracle. And so if we go into the downloads, you'll actually see, we'll actually go down to find Java 8 here. We'll actually pick off Java 8. So as you see, there's two versions of Java 8 here. There's version 201 and 202. And if we actually go into the download page, you can download them separately. There's two reasons for the difference. One is that they're actually licensed under different licenses to a certain extent. And that there's actually additional features in this later version. So in this case, you've got 201. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see 202. 201 is the most stable core release. So if you are doing upgrades, these both include the same security fixes. But 201 is the stable code, which you should be using with the Oracle Business Suite. And 202 has additional features. It may have new features, but it has the same, both of them have the same security fixes. So we strongly recommend you always do the lower version one, because that has the security features, but is also considered more stable. So, very good question. We get that a lot. We're like, okay, which one should I install? Which one should I install from the DBAs?
All right, number two. If we are currently using NetSuite plugin, should we move to Java Web Start?
So our recommendation is, yes, move to Java Web Start, because that will have the best support from Oracle, has some minor security feature updates. So the sandbox is a little bit better, but I really couldn't sit there and say, oh yeah, absolutely, this one feature is the killer feature, and that's the reason you have to upgrade. It's generally just from support, stability. It just works a little bit better, a little bit easier. The big issue is why you would have to do it is based on your browser support internally, because again, the Java plugin has been discontinued by Firefox, Chrome, and Edge. If you're running IE, you can stay on either one, but if you're running Chrome on all your desktops, you have to move to Web Start.
Okay, this question doesn't appear to be full question, but I'll throw it out there and you can respond to it. So does your App Defend product protect against these attacks? I'm not quite sure what these attacks mean.
Yeah, so actually looking at who submitted the question, they're actually a client running App Defend. Yeah, so App Defend works a couple different ways. It's a web application firewall, so it actually is sitting on the front end of the application, but it also has Java agent technology in it. So as part of App Defend's defense, it is providing virtual patching for a number of these security vulnerabilities within Java. I think we get to about 70 or 80% of the Java vulnerabilities. Where on the eBusiness Suite, we're doing about close to 100%, almost always. For Java, there's a couple things that we can't necessarily fix, but mostly those aren't exploitable in Oracle Business Suite environment. But we are providing a layer of protection, either blocking that we know those are Java security vulnerabilities, or behind the scenes, because we run Java agent technology, we intercept calls to those vulnerable classes and actually block access to those vulnerable classes based on if there's an attack string passed into those vulnerable classes. So the bottom line answer is yes, we are providing both eBusiness Suite, application server, virtual patching, as well as Java virtual patching. So it's a very practical product. It's very robust, very functional, and is providing very broad protection for Oracle Business Suite at all those technology stack layers.
All right, Steve, I think that concludes today's session. I want to thank everybody for attending, spending the afternoon or this last hour with us anyway. And also, if you're going to Collaborative 19 down in San Antonio, be sure to look us up. We're giving 7 presentations. Just look us up under Integrigy. You should be able to find all 7 of them. They're spread out Monday through Thursday, actually. So hope to see you down there. All right, again, thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of the day.